Chapter 6, Section 1, the right to vote. History of voting. The framers of the Constitution left the voting qualifications for each state. Expansion of the electorate. 1789 was restricted for white male property owners. 1 in 5 adult males couldn't vote in different states. Today, the voting population has increased for all citizens who are aged 18. It determines who can and can't vote. Results of 200 years of continued, often bitter and sometimes violent. Voting in 1789 has been marked by 2 long-term trends.
Can you go back for just a second? So, what was your motivation for including that kind of picture there?
Oh, I just looked at it and it popped up.
Okay, so you weren't like trying to convey any particular message, just a general theme of suffrage and voting and that kind of thing. Okay.
The first trend, the nation has experienced the elimination of restrictions on voting such as religious belief, property ownership, tax payment, race, and sex.
So talk about those graphics. I think that can be a powerful way to illustrate the message you're trying to get across.
Okay, well, they didn't really have, you can't really do anything, so by hand, it's like, no, you can't do that. Mostly for African Americans.
Where?
For the hand.
Yeah, but for African Americans, where?
Here in the United States.
Where specifically?
Mostly in the South Ends.
Yeah.
And the one with the post where it says unrestricted voting rights, because they want to have also the right to be able to vote, because they thought it was unfair until, I believe, 1850, they were allowed to vote.
You also put in there sex. Which area of the country were women, because a lot of places women were fully enfranchised. They were voting, participating, that kind of thing. Where we talk about blacks being
where they suffered.
Wyoming, like the women voted.
Right. The East was primarily where women were disenfranchised. The West, women had the vote in most states and were fully engaged. And it'd be interesting to find out why that is. I mean, if you can explain why that is, there's a couple of variables for that.
But because most of the people that moved to the West were guys wanting to have a new lifestyle. And could it be that they probably were the majority in that West area, and so they probably felt that they had more power over the women, and so that's probably how things got rolling for the women in the West, as opposed to the women who stayed back in the East, that were not so much in power because most of the power was moving to the West.
Yeah, but what answers the question of why women were enfranchised in the West, but not so much in the East?
Could it be that, I think that most women back then, like in the East, were, well, the area was more conservative, and then I think that the West was more liberal, because for one thing, like, I guess it all could have started, like, on the frontiers. Like, when families started moving to the West, frontiers women, they had to be strong, I guess that had to do with it, and so, like, when the women had to, like take on more, like, manly roles, that, like, made them, like, seem more like they were able to handle things, so maybe women were more, like, independent, and the guys were like, well, they should have the right to vote since they're as independent.
So you're saying there's a whole societal breakdown of traditional norms of women perceived as being weak and incapable, but they've proven themselves in the West and the pioneering to...
A significant share of what was originally the state's power over the right to vote was gradually been assumed by the federal government. Extending the suffrage in 5 stages. Growth of Americans' electorate to its present size and shape came into 5 fairly stages. The first stage came in 1880s. Religious qualification quickly disappeared. No state had religious tests until 1810. One by one, states eliminated property ownership and tax payment. Almost all adults could vote by mid-century.
What do you mean by the first stage? Like the first steps taken into giving everyone the right to a franchise?
Yeah. stage, 15th Amendment gave the citizens power to vote without being denied for their race or color. African Americans were still prevented from voting.
So you're saying the second stage was focused on getting black men the right to vote?
Well, like African Americans were still prevented from voting, so you couldn't really vote.
So what is this second stage then? Because you talked about the 15th Amendment,
Yeah.
and the 15th Amendment states that no condition of previous slavery or servitude will prevent a man from voting.
But wasn't that the loophole in that, wasn't that if their grandparents didn't vote, they weren't able to vote? But they also had the right to vote if the grandparents had voted. Technically,
Because
that
most
means
of them didn't.
the loophole.
Loophole for whom?
For,
The African? Because most of them weren't even able to vote anyways.
so they passed that amendment, didn't they? And they were like, okay, you guys can vote if your grandparents or your ancestors
Were
had.
able to vote.
Yeah.
Well, actually, the 13th, ended slavery, and the 14th was due process. The 15th said it didn't matter whether or not you were in slavery or your ancestors were in slavery. All men are fully able to what?
Vote. Oh, so then it was just a matter of people implementing the whole thing and back in the
No matter what their race or skin color or servitude.
But of course, it was still what? It was still guaranteed only for
white people.
What for men?
men.
For men.
Women come later. And you're going to talk about that stage, right?
The third stage, voting right.
Oh, that's fourth.
Hold on, he's got a question.
What was the question?
I think you had a question.
Oh.
The third stage, 1920. The 19th Amendment was prohibited to deny the right to vote because of sex. Wyoming gave the right to vote to women, for women in 1869. 1920, half of the state followed in their footsteps. The fourth stage.
But I just really want to emphasize that. Let's be clear that just as with blacks, it was some states that were abusing the fully enfranchised right of all blacks to vote, and that was generally in the southern area. Similarly with women, it was some areas of the country that were denying women that right. Other areas of the country had already granted or fully enfranchised women. So just be clear in that historically. I think that's an important point.
The fourth stage, voting right of Act of 1965 guaranteed the right to vote for minorities. The 23rd Amendment 1961 granted citizens District of Columbia the right to vote for presidential electors. 24th Amendment in 1964 eliminated all votes. Oh, this is where when African Americans were actually allowed to vote, because it says for the voting right of 1965 guaranteed the right to vote for minorities. Actually, this was the time where they could actually vote, but without letting them be stopped. You get me?
Okay, go ahead.
I was going to ask is that was the one where they would charge you in order for you to get your vote, right? Like you would be
A poll
charged
tax?
a fee before you can vote.
And remember, from the very beginning, who was responsible for handling all the election procedures? Who historically and constitutionally's job was that? It was the right of the
Elector.
Who oversaw that?
The
The whole electoral process. Who handled that? I'm talking about what political entities were in charge of handling the.
Democrats and the GOP.
There's nothing in nothing about political parties in the Constitution. Who in the Constitution?
Voters.
Huh?
The voters?
Oh, the states. It was
The states. It was the states. So now you have the national government with the fourth stage.
Oh, so the states can't do nothing?
Well, because what were they doing back with the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment? All of the blacks should have been able, black males should have been able to what?
Vote.
Vote. But after the end of Reconstruction of 1877 and the Union troops pulled out, what did the southern states start doing? They started charging things like poll taxes, literacy taxes.
Typical test that they would
difficult test, and they would not stop racist folks from intimidating black voters, right? So now the national government has to what? Step in, and with all these civil rights pieces of legislation you're mentioning, like the Civil Rights Act of 61, 63, 64, 65, the 24th Amendment, now the national government says what to the states? Alabama, Mississippi,
We in charge.
you can no longer be doing this, right? So it took almost 100 years for what was originally passed to actually take place in some of those southern states, right?
People.
The fifth stage, 26th Amendment, 1971, lowered the voting age to 18.
Whoa, slow down. That's a pretty cool thing, don't you think?
What?
Lower down thing to 18. Well, in a way, it could be cool, but in a way, it could also backfire because a lot of kids are, like we said in the last chapter, are influenced by their parents' political party. Not just that, they also sometimes get the wrong information. They just, they're not even like well informed sometimes, you know.
So you're not for the idea of 18-year-old? When would you say is an appropriate age to vote if you don't think 18
There's
is?
really no age.
21.
No, well, to me, like,
There's really
it's
no
kind of
age
hard
just when you're
because,
educated.
yeah,
enough
you
to
could
be a voter.
you could be old enough to vote, you know, but if you're not educated,
Well, what do you say is educated? How would you qualify someone as
at least
quote-unquote
able to
educated?
know who you're
Who's
gonna
the
vote
vice
for and what
president?
he stands for and what he's gonna want to do and what he believes is gonna be right. You know, you have to look at his qualities. You know, what makes him and what's gonna
Not just at
allow
one
him
candidate,
to
but like
change.
at all of them and see what they have to offer.
But doesn't that kind of sound like a literacy test? Trying to determine,
Oh!
hang on, trying to determine whether or not someone is
Smart.
educated? Does that kind of sound like a literacy test of a
So,
sort?
are you trying to say that that's how poll taxes got to be?
Well, I'm not saying poll tax. I'm saying like a literacy test.
There's
Like,
two different
Well,
things, Joey.
I mean, you don't have to be smart to vote, you know, but you have to at least want to make sure that your vote is gonna count. Because
Like
if you're gonna choose the wrong voter, you know, then you just
You're better off not
Rogers,
voting
I
than
think.
you vote.
Mr. Rogers, but wouldn't a good counter argument for that be that like a lot of schools like in different states, for example, California, like makes like schools like teach something about that has to do with like government, like how we're in this class right now. So because not everyone goes off to college, 18 would be the best year because that's around when everyone like has just learned about that and it's the most fresh in their memory, maybe.
so you like the idea of 18-year-olds being able to vote?
Yeah, because like in a way it's not a literacy test, but like it's like the last moment where like you could be taught something about that without being like an actual class or like a literacy test. You guys?
Yeah, and Joey, you mentioned you're kind of nervous about families, the influence of families on a person's vote. What did you mean by that?
Well,
what the
like
chapter meant by
how
that.
Daniela was saying that somebody would tell her that the Republicans are racist.
Oh, yeah.
It's
Yeah.
influential. In a way, you know, like if your family's gonna be voting for, let's say, Jim Costa, you know, then obviously you're like, if your mom and dad are going for that, and you think that they're doing a good job because your parents think they're doing a good job, then you're gonna be influenced by the fact that they're doing a good job, supposedly.
Is that bad?
Yeah.
Yeah. Because you're not taking a side by yourself, you're taking their side.
But what if you're
You-
persuaded by their logic, their rhetoric? What if?
So then there's nothing wrong because you're persuaded by their logic, not by the logic that your parents give you of the person. So in a way they should look at the person and base their options
Find out on their own.
on their own, yeah, instead of being
Hear both sides.
So yeah, it could go both ways. Because it could, you know, your parents could be teaching you the right things and you could, you know, be voting right. But if your parents aren't 100% on it, then you're getting, you know.
So what it comes down to you then is that you can articulate both sides of an issue, both sides of the potential candidates, and be able to say, okay, this
choose
is
the
what
best one.
for you. All right.
The power to set voting qualification. The Constitution doesn't give federal government power to suffrage qualification. The Constitution does have 5 restrictions on how the state allows to vote. The first is any person that a state allows to vote for members of its most numerous branch in their legislature must also be allowed to vote for representatives and senators in Congress. This provision was extended by the 17th Amendment. The second, no state can deny the right to vote to race, color, previous condition of servitude. The third, no state can deny the right to vote to female or male, the 19th Amendment. The fourth, no state can levy any tax in connection with the selection of president, VP, or member of Congress, the 14th Amendment.
Well, let me ask you this, though. Doesn't it cost money to handle an election? I mean, you think about all the papers that have to be mailed out to people so they know the issues and the candidates, plus housing all the stuff and the time it takes for electors at the county level to handle all that stuff. I mean, that can be kind of expensive. Don't you think it's realistic and rational to expect to, get some sort of feedback to cover all the expenses associated with it? I'm just taking the other side. What do you guys think? I mean, you're saying that there shouldn't be any sort of service fee or tax. I mean, everything we do with government now, whether it's going to the DMV or applying for a license, we're constantly paying fees to the government. Why not for a nominal service fee for running an election?
Because in a way,
Well, I think it's because if you require a poll tax of some sort, then you might be excluding like the poorer side of the country, and that's like biased because, for example, back then, all white males that own property are like the richest because they could afford property, and they were excluded. And usually the richest were like the Federalists. So just like they were the Federalists back then, now like the poor people are more like Democrats. So if they were to include a poll tax, they would be like, in a way, excluding a lot of Democrats or like a side of the country that wants to vote for certain things.
So you're saying that by charging a poll tax, you would disenfranchise some of the population that's eligible to vote?
Mm-hmm.
What were you going to say, Joey?
I mean, it's
I was gonna say, it's because it's harder for them to be able to pay for all this stuff. It makes it harder for like the poor people to get out there, because their parties pretty much have to pay for it while they get money, do all this organization, fund their campaign and all this stuff. And it's hard for like someone not that doesn't associate with that party to like try to get recognized, because it's so expensive to run have your campaign. And I think they like that because it just makes it difficult for competition to come up because it's so expensive.
Doesn't it? Don't they do? Do they do? What am I saying? All right. The people that put in for the campaign, they don't get anything back in the end, like no money from
You mean like donating to a particular
yeah,
candidate?
because there are those people that are like, oh, I'll help you, I'll give you this much money so you can get out there, so you can beat this guy, because I don't want this guy to win. And did they get anything back?
Are you asking, does that buy them access to the person once he or she is elected?
No, I'm saying
Like money?
let's say if you were running for president, right, and you're running against, say, and I would give you like, I'll donate $1,000 to your campain,
You don't get a deduction. You don't get any tax deductions
don't-
on that.
But yeah, but
You're
we don't
donating,
get
though.
that. Is
You don't get anything back.
Up here donating?
But let's be honest.
But then
let's
this like
let's be frank.
Yeah.
Honestly, if you're donating to
you
someone,
want something in return, like it's like
yeah.
don't hurt my business because this other guy probably wants to.
you give a call and say, hey, Mr. Rogers, I've got my own landscaping business here, and they're proposing the Assembly and the Senate in California, they're proposing to,
We'll have natural government for all landscape.
yeah, they're going to put all these regulations on it. It would really hurt my business. Is there anything you can do? And I would say, well, Joey, you donated what to me? Oh, you know what? I have an opening in my schedule. Why don't you come on in, we'll talk about it.
So in a way, it is kind of like No, yeah.
Go to sleep, Joey.
Okay, so go back. I'm sorry, I didn't see what you put on the board there. Oh, that was the poll tax. Okay.
The fifth, no state can deny a voter at least at age of 18.
Self-explanatory.
Can someone remind us the historical reason for that particular amendment? Why was that one passed when it was?
Because they were being drafted.
And
Old enough to fight, old enough to
Yeah.
vote. Oh.
Oh.
But not old enough.
No state can modify restrictions of voting. Supreme Court in 1975 held v. Stone illustrated this point. Those who own taxable property could vote in the city bond election. Court found those who do and don't own taxable property unreasonable qualifications and prohibited it by 14th Amendment Equal Protection Clause.
And you guys know today that there are still some states and even some counties within some states where, you know, every 10 years there's a census, right, that's conducted.
Yeah.
And it's to determine where the population's living. And based off of that census, House seats are reapportioned in the House of Representatives. And before a state or some counties can redesign the boundaries, they have to get what's called pre-clearance through the Department of Justice. That means if they've had a history of disenfranchising certain groups of people, before they propose these new boundaries, which might minimize, because what a lot of southern states used to do is they would do what's called packing, and they would pack the black vote into certain districts. Even though they were strange-shaped districts, they would put like 100% of them in there, and that way they were guaranteed that the blacks would get that district, and then they could free up more areas to get more of the kind of representatives they wanted. That's called the Matthew effect. That's called gerrymandering. And so now they're actually... No, it's totally illegal. That's why some of these states have to get pre-clearance from the Department of Justice to show that it will not. The burden of proof is on the state to show that they will not be disenfranchising certain people because of the new districts they've designed. California actually has a couple of counties that have to still get pre-clearance, and Merced County is one of those areas because we have a history, have had in the past, of disenfranchising. So.
Who? Us Mexicans.
Okay, we're going to walk section